I'm Leandra Letterman.
And I'm Allison Christians. It's time to break into tax.
Welcome to Tax Papers Unlocked. Today we'll be discussing the paper by Professor Dr. Rita de la Feria from the University of Leeds and Dr. Georgia Maffini from PricewaterhouseCoopers, The Impact of Digitalization on Personal Income Taxes.
Welcome, Rita. It's great to have you with us here at Break Into Tax. And as you know, with Tax Papers Unlocked, we are starting out with the elevator pitch. So give us your pitch.
This paper is about the impact of remote working on personal income taxes. The remote working has been increasing over the pandemic period, and we think it's going to stay, and is going to stay for people at the top of the income distribution. So we think that it's going to have significant impact on revenues across the world.
So Rita, we're in the elevator, but this conference that we're at is in London. And so we're actually going to the 40th floor. And there's some time to hear a little bit more about your paper. Is there more that you can unlock for us?
Sure. So the paper looks at remote working and how likely it is to stay. And we estimate that some people will continue to do remote working, and those people will sit at the top of the income distribution. Some of those, not all, but some of those are likely to be remote workers from an interjurisdictional perspective. So they will be working in one country whilst living in another country. Now, this was already happening at a smaller scale before the pandemic. We had already some instances of this in very wealthy individuals, expats, people who were retired from work. But with the pandemic, it has spread to a large part of the workforce. So we estimate that this is going to have a significant impact on countries, and is not only in terms of revenue loss. So for the UK, we looked at upper estimate and a lower estimate, and we think it will be somewhere between £6 billion and £32 billion that will now be at risk. But it will also have a bunch of other spillover effects. So effects on VAT because of consumption propensity, effects on corporate income tax because of PE and how people are located and value is created. And we think it's going to have also a very significant distributional impact, because if the richer people in your society are now mobile, that is going to have a bigger weight on people on lower incomes. So we think that the ramifications are very significant.
So we've arrived at the 40th floor.
Oh, great. We're at the reception. That gives us a little bit of time for you to ask a follow-up question.
Rita, do you think the result of this shift in remote work will be primarily reallocation of the existing pie in terms of tax revenues, shrinking of the overall pie due to tax evasion, or some combination?
So we don't know at this stage how countries will react. It will be dependent on the circumstances of various countries. So for example, we think that the phenomenon will be more felt in countries that are heavily dependent on personal income taxes, which is not all the world, as you know, and countries that are heavily dependent on high income taxpayers at the top of the income distribution. So the more you're reliant on personal income taxes, the more you're relying on high income taxpayers, the more likely it is that you're going to feel the labor shifts with the remote working. But for those countries, if you look at the example from corporate income tax and what we see from corporate income tax when capital became more mobile, we can take some educated guesses about what we think is going to happen with personal income taxes. And what we think is going to likely happen is that there will be initially a tightening of rules on employment, and probably an introduction of some anti-avoidance rules, some exit taxes, although, for example, inside Europe, you can't do that. So we think that there is going to be an initial shifting of the law amendment to try and prevent this from happening and the revenue losses from emerging. And then on the second stage, we think that is going to increase personal income tax competition and the introduction of preferential regimes in order to attract these new mobile workers. And our biggest fear is the destabilization of the personal income tax system, the same way it happened to corporate income tax. And once that destabilization sets in, it's much harder to reach an agreement, as we're witnessing with corporate income tax. So our plea is for action now before countries have the time to act unilaterally and destabilize the system and reach an agreement at a stage that it's still easier to reach an agreement. Because afterwards, if corporate income tax is anything to go by, it will be much harder.
I think it's a really interesting paper. It's really timely, and it's really troubling that the kind of competition that we're focused on might not be actually where the action is going forward. We might just be behind the ball again. The only thing left is to give us the takeaways.
Well, until now, we have been focusing on corporate income tax, and we thought that the biggest challenge of digitalization would be to corporate income tax systems. And I think that what we're seeing right now, as a result of the increase in remote working, is that the biggest challenges will be to personal income tax, and the societal ramifications are likely to be much bigger than what we're seeing for corporate income tax. So we need to reshift our attention and focus on what matters before things get much worse than they are now.
Rita, thanks for joining us in the elevator at the conference and in producing such great scholarship. This has been The Impact of Digitalization on Personal Income Taxes with Professor Dr. Rita de la Feria.
Thanks for joining us as you break into tax.